The frozen bodies weren't discovered until spring. Two strangers, buried in snow, locked together in a final embrace that told a story no one would ever fully understand. But this isn't about how they died. It's about the brutal winter that should have killed them a dozen times over, and somehow didn't. This is the story of a desperate man gambling everything on a woman he'd never met, a blizzard that tried to erase them both, and the wolves that came when they thought the worst had passed. Hit like, drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels, and let me find out if you can handle what happened next. The train was 2 hours late, and Coulter Hayes was beginning to think that was Providence trying to save him from himself. He stood on the splintered platform of Bent Creek Station, watching his breath turn to fog in the December air, wondering what kind of fool sent $20 to a woman he'd never seen and expected her to show up. The station was little more than a wind-beaten shack with a crooked sign, and the few people waiting had already gone inside to escape the cold. Coulter stayed outside. He figured if she took one look at him through the window and decided to get back on that train, he'd rather not have witnesses. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of coming snow. He knew that smell. Grew up with it. Out here you learn to read weather the way some men read books, and what Coulter was reading now made his jaw tight. Big storm. Maybe the biggest he'd seen in years. And here he was, waiting for a city woman who probably thought Montana was all cowboys and sunshine. He pulled the letter from his coat pocket, unfolded it for the 100th time. The paper was soft from handling, the ink slightly smeared. Mr. Hayes, I accept your offer of marriage. I have no family remaining in Philadelphia and no prospects I consider worth staying for. I'm 26 years old, healthy, and accustomed to hard work. I do not expect romance or affection, only honesty and a home where I might be useful. If these terms are acceptable, I will arrive on the December 14th train. Respectfully, Evelyn Mercer. Honesty and a home where she might be useful. Jesus. What kind of life made a woman write something like that? What kind of life made a man answer an ad in the back of a newspaper, for that matter? The train whistle cut through his thoughts, distant but growing closer. Coulter's hands went cold, and it had nothing to do with the weather. This was it. In about 5 minutes, he'd either meet his future wife or watch the worst decision of his life pull away from the station. He'd written the ad 3 months ago, sitting in his cabin after another night of silence so complete it felt like drowning. Rancher-seeking wife, must be strong, willing to work, able to withstand isolation and harsh winters, no drinkers, no complainers. Right to C. Hayes, Bent Creek, Montana Territory. He'd sent it to 4 newspapers back east and got 7 responses. 5 of them wanted to know how much land he had. One asked if he attended church regularly. Only Evelyn's letter mentioned nothing about what she'd get from him, only what she could offer. That should have been his first clue she was running from something. The train rounded the bend, black smoke pouring from its stack, metal screaming against metal as it slowed. Coulter moved to the edge of the platform, his heart doing something stupid in his chest. 3 people stepped off. An old man with a cane, a young couple arguing about luggage, and then her. She wasn't what he expected. Not pretty, exactly, but not plain either. Somewhere in between, with dark hair pulled back severe and simple, a traveling dress that had seen better days, and a canvas bag that looked like it held everything she owned. But it was her eyes that stopped him. Gray-blue, sharp, taking in the station and the mountains beyond, with the kind of wariness that came from learning not to trust first impressions. Those eyes landed on him, and Coulter knew immediately she was doing the same calculation he was. Measuring, deciding. He stepped forward. Miss Mercer? Mr. Hayes. It wasn't a question. Her voice was lower than he expected, steady. Thank you for meeting me. Wasn't sure you'd come. I said I would. They stood there, 2 strangers who'd just legally committed to spending the rest of their lives together, neither one knowing what the hell to say next. Up close, he could see she was tired. Not just from the train ride, deeper than that. The kind of tired that settled into your bones after months or years of something grinding you down. We should get moving, Coulter finally said. Storm's coming, big one. Ranch is about 18 miles northwest, and we need to beat the snow. She glanced at the sky, then back at him. How long do we have? Few hours, maybe less. Then we shouldn't waste time standing here. No tears. No questions about what she was getting into. Just practical acceptance that if he said they needed to move, they needed to move. Coulter picked up her bag, lighter than he expected, and led her to the wagon. The horse, a gray gelding named Ash, stamped impatiently in the cold. Coulter loaded her bag and offered his hand to help her up. She took it, her fingers cold even through her gloves, and climbed onto the bench seat without hesitation. He took the reins and got them moving. For the first mile, neither of them spoke. The only sounds were the wagon wheels crunching over frozen ground and Ash's steady breathing. The station disappeared behind them, and the road, barely more than twin ruts through scrub grass, stretched toward mountains that looked like broken teeth against the gray sky. Coulter kept sneaking glances at her. She sat straight-backed, hands folded in her lap, watching the landscape pass like she was memorizing it. He wondered what she saw. Probably nothing like Philadelphia. Out here, the land didn't care if you lived or died. It just existed, vast and indifferent, waiting to see if you were strong enough to carve out a piece of it. "It's bigger than I imagined," she said suddenly. "What is?" "All of it, the space. I've never seen this much empty land." Gets emptier the farther out we go. Ranch is in a valley, 15 miles from the nearest neighbor. Town's a half-day ride in good weather. Winter, sometimes you don't see another soul for months. He watched her process that. Waiting for the fear, the regret, the inevitable realization that she'd made a terrible mistake. Instead, she just nodded. "That's fine." "Fine?" "I didn't come here for neighbors, Mr. Hayes." "Coulter," he said. "If we're going to be married, you should probably use my name." "Coulter." She tested it like she was trying on a coat to see if it fit. "You can call me Evelyn." "Evelyn." Silence stretched again, but this time it felt different, less awkward, more like two people learning each other's rhythm. "Can I ask you something?" "Yes." "Your letter said you had no family. If that's too personal..." "Typhoid," she cut in, matter of fact. "Took my mother and younger brother 2 years ago. My father died in a factory accident when I was 16. I have a cousin in Boston, but we haven't spoken since the funeral. She made it clear I wasn't welcome to impose on her household." The flatness in her voice told Coulter everything he needed to know about that cousin. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. I learned to take care of myself." She glanced at him. "What about you? Your ad didn't mention family either." "Fair question." He'd opened that door. "Parents passed when I was young. Influenza. Uncle raised me, taught me ranching. He died 3 years back, left me the land, no siblings, no wife." He paused. "Had a woman once. She took one winter out here and left. Said she didn't sign up to freeze to death in the middle of nowhere." "When was that?" 5 years ago." Evelyn was quiet for a moment. 5 years is a long time to be alone." "Yeah." He didn't know what else to say to that. The wind picked up, colder now, sharp enough to sting. Coulter urged Ash faster. The sky was darkening in the west, clouds piling up like dirty wool. He'd been watching weather his whole life, and every instinct he had was screaming that they were running out of time. "How bad is it going to be?" Evelyn asked. She'd seen him looking at the sky. "Bad. Maybe worse than bad." "Have you been through storms like this before?" "Yeah, but never with someone who wasn't used to them." He glanced at her. "I won't lie to you, Evelyn. Next few days are going to be hard, harder than anything you've probably experienced. If the storm hits, like I think it will, we'll be trapped. No help. No way out. Just us and whatever supplies we have." She met his eyes, and there wasn't fear in them, just that same steady calculation. "Then tell me what I need to know. Don't treat me like I'm fragile." Something in Coulter's chest shifted. "First thing, when we get to the ranch, we move the livestock into the barn and secure everything that might blow away. Then we get ourselves inside and we don't leave unless it's life or death. Storm like this, you can get lost between the cabin and the barn. Whiteout conditions, no visibility. People freeze to death 20 feet from their own door. How do you navigate in whiteout? Rope, tied from the cabin to the barn. You hold on to it, you follow it back. You let go, you're dead." She absorbed that without flinching. "What else?" "Ration food and firewood. Keep the fire going, but not too hot. We need the wood to last. Melt snow for water. Check on the animals twice a day if possible, but only if it's safe. If it's not safe, the animals wait." He paused. "And if something happens to me, you stay inside, you hear me? You don't come looking. You wait for the storm to pass." If something happens to you, I'll be alone out here with no idea how to survive. You'll survive longer inside than you will outside looking for me. That's assuming I'd be willing to sit inside while you die. Coulter turned to stare at her. We've known each other for an hour. And in an hour, I'll be your wife. You think I'm the kind of person who'd let you freeze because we're still strangers? He didn't have an answer for that. The first snowflakes started falling around mile 10, small at first, lazy, drifting down like they had all the time in the world. Within 15 minutes, they weren't lazy anymore. The wind shifted, coming hard from the northwest, driving the snow sideways. Visibility dropped. Hold on, Coulter said, snapping the reins. Ash broke into a faster trot, the wagon jolting over the rough ground. Evelyn gripped the seat, but didn't complain. The temperature was plummeting. Coulter could feel it through his coat, and he knew she had to be freezing in that thin traveling dress. But she didn't say a word. The ranch appeared through the snow like something from a fever dream. A small cabin, weathered gray wood, smoke already rising from the chimney. He'd banked the fire before leaving. A barn, bigger than the cabin, doors secured with rope, fencing around a paddock where 4 cattle and 2 horses stood with their backs to the wind. It wasn't much. Hell, it wasn't anything compared to what a city woman probably expected. But it was home. And right now it was the only thing standing between them and death. Coulter jumped down before the wagon fully stopped. Get inside, he shouted over the wind. Doors unlocked. Fire's going. I'll handle the animals. Evelyn didn't move to get down. I can help. You don't know what you're doing. Then tell me. He stared at her, snow already coating her hair and shoulders, and made a decision he'd probably regret. Fine. Grab the chickens from the coop behind the barn. Get them inside the barn, close the coop door so it doesn't blow away. Then help me get the cattle in. Move fast, don't think, and if you start losing feeling in your hands or feet, you tell me immediately. She was down from the wagon before he finished talking. The next 30 minutes were chaos. Coulter had done this before, prepped for storms, but never while trying to keep track of someone who'd never worked a ranch in her life. He got Ash and the other horses into the barn first, then turned to the cattle. The animals were already spooked, lowing and stamping, sensing the storm. He and Evelyn managed to herd them toward the barn, but one, a stubborn heifer, kept breaking away. Get behind her, Coulter yelled. Drive her toward the door. Evelyn moved, slipping once in the snow but getting back up without hesitating. She grabbed a stick from the ground and used it to guide the heifer, shouting and waving until the animal finally bolted through the barn door. By the time they got the last chicken inside and secured the barn, the storm was roaring. Wind screamed across the valley, driving snow so thick Coulter couldn't see the cabin anymore. Rope! He shouted, pointing to the line he'd strung earlier. Grab it, and don't let go. Evelyn's hands found the rope. Coulter took the lead, pulling them both forward, step by brutal step. The wind tried to tear him away. Snow caked his face, blinding him. His hands were numb. 20 feet, just 20 feet to the cabin door. He slammed into the wall first, felt along it until his frozen fingers found the door handle. He shoved it open, pulled Evelyn inside, and kicked the door shut behind them. The silence was shocking. They stood there, dripping melted snow onto the floor, breathing hard. Coulter's hands were shaking, from cold or adrenaline. He wasn't sure. Evelyn's lips had a blue tint that scared him. Fire, he managed. Get by the fire. She moved like she was in a dream, stumbling to the hearth where flames crackled. Coulter followed, adding more wood, building the heat up. Outside, the wind howled like something alive and furious. Take off your wet clothes, he said, not looking at her. There's blankets in the chest by the bed. You need to get warm. You're shaking. I'm fine. You're not fine. Her voice was sharp. You're hypothermic. So are you. They stared at each other, 2 half-frozen strangers in a cabin that suddenly felt very small. Then Evelyn did something that surprised him. She laughed. Not hysterical, just exhausted and slightly unhinged. This is my wedding day, she said. I'm standing in a cabin in Montana, half frozen, covered in chicken feathers, with a man I met 3 hours ago, and there's a blizzard trying to kill us. Coulter felt his own laugh building, equally unhinged. Yeah, that about covers it. Do you have any whiskey? Cabinet above the stove. She found the bottle, took a long pull straight from it, and handed it to him. Coulter drank, feeling the burn spread through his chest. It helped. They stripped off their wet outer layers in silence, Coulter turning his back to give her privacy, both of them wrapping themselves in blankets. The cabin was small. One room, a bed in the corner, a table and 2 chairs, the fireplace, a stove, shelves with supplies. Simple. Sparse. Not what any woman dreamed of for her first home. "I know it's not much," Coulter started. "It's fine. Evelyn, I mean it." She sat in one of the chairs, blanket pulled tight around her shoulders, and looked at him with those steady eyes. "I didn't come here expecting luxury. I came here because I needed somewhere to go, and you needed someone to help you survive. That's the deal we made. This cabin is fine." Coulter sat in the other chair, the bottle of whiskey between them. The fire crackled. Outside, the storm raged. "We should probably make it official," he said quietly. "What?" "The marriage. I mean, we're supposed to go into town, find a preacher, do it proper. But that's not happening now. Storm like this could last days, so maybe we just say the words ourselves, if you want." Evelyn was quiet for a long moment. "You don't have to marry me just because I'm here." "I'm not. I want to, if you do." "Why?" The question caught him off guard. "What do you mean, why? Why do you want to marry me? You don't know me. I could be terrible. I could be mean or lazy or—" "You stood in a blizzard and herded cattle for a stranger," Coulter cut in. "You didn't complain once. You didn't cry or ask to go back. You just did what needed doing. That tells me more about you than a year of courting would." Her eyes were bright in the firelight. "You did the same thing. You could have left me at the station, told me to find my own way. But you didn't. Guess we're both fools then." "Guess so." Coulter stood, held out his hand. "Evelyn Mercer, will you marry me? For real this time, not just on paper. In this cabin, in front of this fire, with a blizzard trying to tear the roof off. Will you take me as your husband?" She stood too, took his hand. Hers was warmer now, no longer blue with cold. "Coulter Hayes, I will. On the condition that you take me as your wife, not a servant, not a burden, an equal partner." "Deal." They didn't kiss. It felt too soon for that, too strange. Instead, they shook hands like they were sealing a business arrangement. Maybe they were. But standing there in the firelight, with the storm screaming outside and the warmth slowly returning to their bones, it felt like something more, like the beginning of something neither of them could name yet. "I should check the rope," Coulter said after a moment. "Make sure it didn't come loose in the wind. I'll make something to eat, if you tell me where the food is. Potatoes in the sack by the stove, salted pork in the crate. Coffee, if you want it." She nodded, moving toward the stove. Coulter pulled his coat back on, still damp, but better than nothing. He opened the door a crack. Wind immediately tried to rip it from his hands. He forced it shut again. "It's bad," he said. Evelyn looked up from the potatoes she was peeling. "How bad?" "Worst I've seen." He moved back to the fire, trying to think. "Rope might not hold in wind like this. If it snaps, we're cut off from the barn." "Can we replace it?" "Not in this. We'd never make it." They looked at each other, the reality settling between them. If the rope failed, the animals were on their own. And if the animals died, they'd lose their food supply for the winter, which meant they might not make it to spring. "How long can the livestock survive without us checking on them?" Evelyn asked. "Couple days, maybe. Depends on how cold it gets. If the water freezes solid, less than that. So we wait until the storm breaks." "Yeah." "And if it doesn't break?" Coulter met her eyes. "Then we make hard choices." She went back to peeling potatoes, her knife moving with steady precision. "Tell me about the ranch. What you do here. I want to know what I'm going to be doing once this storm passes." So he told her. About the cattle, only 4 right now, but he was hoping to build the herd. About the horses, 1 for riding and 1 for work. About the chickens that gave them eggs. The garden plot that Evelyn would probably be in charge of come spring. The fence line that always needed mending. The roof that leaked in 3 places. The well that sometimes ran dry in summer. It wasn't a pretty picture. It was hard work, backbreaking and endless. The kind of life that aged you fast. Evelyn listened to all of it, nodding occasionally, asking practical questions. Where was the garden? How much feed did the animals need? What crops grew best in this climate? "You're not scared," Coulter said, surprised. "Of what?" The work, the isolation, the not knowing if we'll make it through the winter. She looked at him, and for the first time he saw something vulnerable in her expression. I am scared. Terrified, actually, but I was terrified in Philadelphia too. At least here, I'm scared and useful. That's better than being scared and useless. What were you doing in Philadelphia? Working in a textile factory. 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. The pay was barely enough to afford a room I shared with 3 other women. No future. No hope of anything better. Just surviving until I couldn't anymore. She set down the knife. Your ad was the first time in 2 years I felt like maybe there was a way out. Coulter didn't know what to say to that. How did you respond when someone told you that marrying a stranger and moving to the middle of nowhere was their best option? I'll try to make it worth it, he finally said, coming all this way. Just don't lie to me. That's all I ask. Don't make promises you can't keep. Don't pretend this is something it's not. We're partners trying to survive. If that's all it ever is, I can live with that. And if it becomes more? She met his eyes. Then we'll deal with that when it happens. They ate potatoes and pork in silence, the storm still raging outside. Coulter tried not to think about the rope, the animals, the food supply that would need to last until spring. Tried not to think about the woman sitting across from him, who was now legally his wife, and how strange it felt to have another person in the cabin after years of silence. Where should I sleep? Evelyn asked after they'd cleaned up. Coulter gestured to the bed. You take it. I'll take the floor by the fire. That's ridiculous. We're married. We can share the bed. You sure about that? I'm sure about not making you sleep on the floor in your own cabin. She stood, wrapping the blanket tighter. I trust you. You've given me no reason not to. They settled on opposite sides of the narrow bed, both fully clothed, a careful distance between them. The fire crackled. Outside, the wind screamed. Coulter? Yeah? Thank you. For coming to the station. For bringing me here. For not leaving me behind. You're my wife. Of course I didn't leave you behind. You say that like it's obvious, but I've been left behind before. It's not obvious to me. He rolled over to look at her. In the dim light from the fire, her face was shadowed, but he could see her eyes, still guarded, still wary, but with something else underneath. Hope, maybe. Or the fragile beginning of trust. I won't leave you behind, he said. Storm or no storm, that's a promise. That's the first promise you've made me. Won't be the last. She smiled, small and uncertain, but real. Good. They fell asleep to the sound of the blizzard trying to tear the world apart. And somewhere in the darkness, neither of them quite alone anymore. They stopped being complete strangers and became something else. Partners. Maybe, eventually, more than that. But first, they had to survive the night. But for poet. The storm didn't let up. When Coulter woke, weak gray light was filtering through the cabin's single window, but the world outside was nothing but white. Snow had drifted halfway up the glass. The wind was still howling, though maybe slightly less violent than the night before. Evelyn was already awake, crouched by the fire, feeding it small pieces of wood. Morning, Coulter said, his voice rough. Is it? I can't tell. She glanced at him. How long do these usually last? Depends. Could be another day. Could be 3. The animals? I know. He sat up, every muscle stiff. I need to check the rope. If it's still intact, I'll make a run to the barn. In this? Don't have a choice. He pulled on his coat and boots, wrapped a scarf around his face. Evelyn stood, watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Be careful. Always am. He opened the door and immediately regretted it. The wind hit him like a fist, driving snow into every exposed inch of skin. He forced himself forward, found the rope. Still there, still holding. Relief rushed through him. He followed it hand over hand, the world reduced to 3 feet of visibility and the rough hemp under his frozen fingers. The barn door was frozen shut. He had to kick it 3 times before it gave way. Inside, the animals were huddled together for warmth. The chickens were fine, perched on rafters. The horses and cattle looked stressed, but alive. Coulter broke ice from their water trough, scattered feed, checked for injuries. Everything seemed okay. For now. He made it back to the cabin, gasping, his lungs burning from the cold. Evelyn had coffee waiting. He drank it gratefully. "They're all right," he said. "For now." "How often do you need to check?" "Twice a day if the storm keeps up. Morning and night." She nodded, filing that information away. They spent the rest of the day doing small tasks, mending clothes, organizing supplies, rationing food. Evelyn turned out to be good with her hands, quick and precise. She fixed a tear in Coulter's spare shirt that he'd been ignoring for months. By nightfall, the storm was worse again. The wind shifted, coming from the north now, even colder. Coulter checked the barn once more, fighting his way through drifts that were waist-deep in places. When he got back, his hands were so numb he couldn't unfasten his coat. Evelyn had to do it for him, her fingers quick and efficient. "You're going to lose fingers if you keep this up," she said. "Animals need water. And we need you alive." They argued about it, the first real argument of their marriage. Evelyn insisted there had to be a better way than making these death runs twice a day. Coulter insisted there wasn't. Finally, they compromised. Morning checks only, unless something seemed wrong. That night, they lay in bed again, listening to the storm. It felt different from the first night, more familiar somehow, less terrifying. "Tell me something about yourself," Evelyn said into the darkness. "Like what?" "I don't know. Anything. Something that's not about survival or ranching or the storm." Coulter thought. "I like reading. Not good at it, but I like it. Uncle had a few books. I've read them so many times I have them memorized." "What books?" "Treasure Island, some Shakespeare, a book about the Roman Empire." "I used to read too. Before—" She trailed off. "I miss it. I've got the books here. You can read them if you want." "I'd like that." Another silence, but comfortable now. "Evelyn?" "Yeah?" "I'm glad you came, even with the storm, even with everything being—" He struggled for the word. "Terrifying and uncertain?" "Yeah, that." He felt her hand find his under the blanket. Her fingers were warm. "Me too," she said softly. "I'm glad I came." And lying there in the darkness, with the blizzard screaming outside and no guarantee they'd live through the week, Coulter Hayes felt something he hadn't felt in 5 years. Not quite hope, but close. Very close. The storm didn't break on the third day like Coulter hoped. It got worse. He woke to a sound he'd never heard before, a low grinding noise that seemed to come from the earth itself. The cabin was shaking, not violently, but enough that the tin cups hanging on the wall rattled against each other like nervous teeth. Evelyn was already awake, sitting up in bed with her blanket pulled tight around her shoulders. "What is that?" Coulter moved to the window, scraped away the frost with his sleeve. What he saw made his stomach drop. The snow had risen another 3 feet overnight, and the wind was driving it into drifts that looked like ocean waves frozen mid-crash. One drift had completely buried the north side of the cabin. That grinding sound was the weight of it settling against the walls. "We're getting buried," he said. "Can the cabin handle it?" "Don't know. Never seen it this bad." He pulled on his boots, already thinking through the math. If the snow kept piling up at this rate, they'd be completely entombed by nightfall. The weight could collapse the roof, and even if it didn't, they'd have no way out. "I need to dig us a path to the door, and check that the chimney's clear." "I'll help." "Evelyn, don't." She was already pulling on the spare pants and shirt he'd given her, wool socks layered thick. "We've been through this. You can't do everything alone." She was right, but that didn't make him like it. They wrapped themselves in every layer they could find, tied scarves across their faces, and prepared to step into hell. The door wouldn't open. Coulter had to throw his shoulder against it 3 times before the snow gave way enough to create a gap. The wind immediately tried to slam it shut again. He wedged his boot in the opening and forced it wider. Outside was a white nightmare. The world had disappeared. No mountains, no valley, no barn, just snow and wind and cold that felt like it could strip flesh from bone. "Stay close," Coulter shouted, but the wind tore his words away. They dug. Coulter used a shovel he kept by the door. Evelyn used a board ripped from an old crate. The snow was heavy, wet, the kind that soaked through gloves in minutes. Every shovelful they moved, the wind filled back in. It was like fighting the ocean. After 20 minutes, Coulter's arms were burning and his lungs felt like he'd swallowed glass. He glanced at Evelyn. She was still digging, methodical and relentless, but her lips were pale and her hands were shaking. "Inside!" he shouted. "Now!" They stumbled back through the door. Coulter slammed it shut and they both collapsed on the floor, gasping. The cabin felt warm as summer compared to what they'd just been in, but Coulter knew that was an illusion. The temperature inside was barely above freezing. "Your hands," Evelyn said, still breathing hard. He looked down. His gloves were soaked through, fingers red and swollen. He couldn't feel 3 of them. "Yours aren't better." Her gloves were in the same condition. They stripped them off, held their hands close to the fire. The return of feeling was agony, sharp needles of pain that made Coulter's jaw clench. Evelyn made a small sound, quickly cut off, but he saw the tears at the corners of her eyes. "We can't keep doing this," she said once the pain faded to a dull throb. "Don't have a choice." "There's always a choice. We just don't like the alternatives." Coulter knew what she meant. They could stop trying to maintain the path, let themselves get buried, hope the cabin held and the snow eventually stopped. Or they could keep fighting, keep digging, and risk freezing to death in the process. "The animals need checking," he said. "When did you check them last?" "Yesterday morning." "So they're all right for now." It wasn't a question. Evelyn stood, moved to the stove, started making coffee from their dwindling supply. "We need to think this through instead of just reacting. What's the actual danger right now? To us, I mean, not the livestock." Coulter forced himself to think past the panic clawing at his chest. "Roof could collapse. Chimney could get blocked, and we'd suffocate on smoke. We could run out of firewood because I can't get to the woodpile. And if we stay trapped too long—" He didn't finish that sentence. "We starve," Evelyn finished for him. "How much food do we have? A month, maybe, if we're careful. And if the storm lasts longer than a month? It won't. But if it does?" He met her eyes. "Then we're dead. But worrying about that now doesn't help us." She poured coffee, handed him a cup. Her hands were steadier than his. "So we prioritize. Keep the chimney clear. That's survival. Monitor the roof. Also survival. The path to the door and the animals, those are secondary. We do what we can, when we can, but we don't kill ourselves trying." It was the practical thing, the smart thing. And Coulter hated it because it meant accepting that the livestock might die, which meant their future died with them. But she was right. They had to survive this week before they could worry about spring. "All right," he said. "We do it your way." They fell into a rhythm over the next 2 days. Every few hours, Coulter climbed onto the roof, accessed through a narrow hatch in the ceiling, and cleared snow from the chimney and the worst of the drifts. It was brutal work, exposed to the full force of the wind, but necessary. Evelyn took over managing their supplies, rationing food and firewood with an efficiency that surprised him. She'd make a pot of weak soup stretch for 2 days, watering it down until it was barely more than broth, but keeping them fed. At night they'd lie in bed and talk. Small things mostly. Evelyn told him about Philadelphia, about the factory where she'd worked. She described the noise, the constant clatter of machines that left her ears ringing even in sleep, the lint that filled the air until every breath tasted like cotton. The other women who worked beside her, most of them too tired to be friends but too familiar to be strangers. "There was a girl," Evelyn said one night. "Anna, 16, maybe 17. First week there, her hair got caught in one of the machines." She was quiet for a moment. "They stopped the line for 20 minutes to cut her loose. She lost most of her scalp. They docked everyone's pay for the lost time." Coulter felt sick. "What happened to her?" "I don't know. She never came back?" Evelyn's voice was flat, empty of emotion. "That's when I started looking at the ads in the back of the newspaper. Figured if I was going to risk dying, might as well be somewhere I could breathe clean air. This isn't exactly safe either." "No, but at least here, if I die, it'll be from weather or wolves or some honest thing, not from a machine that doesn't care if I exist or not." He understood that. Out here, the land was brutal, but it wasn't cruel. It didn't single you out. It tested everyone equally. Coulter told her about his uncle, about learning to ranch when he was barely tall enough to reach a horse's stirrup, about the first time he delivered a calf on his own and the pride he'd felt when it survived, about the woman who'd left, whose name was Sarah, and how he'd woken up one morning to find a note on the table and all her things gone. What did the note say? Evelyn asked. That she was sorry, that she tried, that some people weren't made for this kind of life. He stared at the ceiling. She wasn't wrong. Most people aren't made for this. Are you? Don't know what else I'd be made for. That's not the same as wanting it. Coulter rolled over to look at her. In the dim firelight, her face was all shadows and angles. You think I don't want this? I think you want it, but I also think you're lonely. And I don't know if those two things can exist together without one of them winning eventually. She was too perceptive. It made him uncomfortable and also relieved, like finally someone could see him clearly enough to understand. What about you? You want this? I want to survive. If I can do that here, then yes. If this place kills me, she shrugged. At least I'll have tried something different. They were still strangers in so many ways, but lying there in the dark, with the storm trying to erase them, Coulter felt something shifting. Not love. Too soon for that. But trust. Maybe. The beginning of understanding that they were both running from something, and maybe towards something too. On the 5th day, disaster struck. Coulter had gone up to clear the chimney again. It was late afternoon, the wind screaming, visibility down to nothing. He worked fast, shoveling snow off the roof, trying not to think about the drop to the ground or the ice that made every step treacherous. He was almost done when he heard the scream. For a second, his brain couldn't process it. Then he was moving, scrambling toward the hatch, dropping through it so fast he nearly broke his ankle on the landing. Evelyn was on the floor near the door, clutching her leg. Her face was white, twisted with pain. What happened? Coulter dropped to his knees beside her. I was checking the door, thought I heard something, and I slipped on the ice. My ankle. She bit down on whatever sound wanted to escape. I think it's broken. Coulter's hands were gentle as he examined her ankle, but she still flinched. It was already swelling, the skin starting to bruise. He couldn't tell if it was broken or just badly sprained, and out here, it didn't matter. Both meant the same thing. She wasn't walking on it. Can you move your toes? She tried, managed it, but the pain made her gasp. Yes, probably not broken then. Bad sprain. He sat back, running through options and finding none of them good. You need to stay off it completely. Ice to bring down the swelling, then keep it elevated and wrapped. For how long? Week, maybe 2. The implications settled between them like another weight of snow on the roof. If Evelyn couldn't walk, she couldn't help, which meant Coulter was doing everything alone again, in the middle of the worst storm he'd ever seen. I'm sorry, Evelyn said, and there were tears on her face now, not from pain, from frustration. I'm so sorry, I should have been more careful. Stop. Coulter gripped her shoulders. This isn't your fault. It's ice and bad luck. We'll manage. How? He didn't have an answer for that. He got her settled in bed, ankle wrapped, and elevated on their spare blanket rolled up. He made her drink whiskey for the pain, even though she protested they needed to save it. Then he went back outside to finish clearing the chimney, because if he stopped moving, he'd have to think about how impossible everything had just become. That night was the worst since the storm started. The wind reached a new level of violence, battering the cabin like it wanted to tear it apart board by board. Something crashed outside. Maybe part of the barn roof, maybe the chicken coop. Coulter couldn't tell and couldn't check. Evelyn lay in bed, her face tight with pain despite the whiskey. Coulter sat beside her, feeding the fire, trying not to let her see how scared he was. Talk to me, she said quietly. I need to think about something other than this. What do you want to talk about? Anything. Tell me about summer here. What's it like? So he did. He described the valley when it wasn't trying to kill them, the grass that grew thick and green, high enough to brush a horse's belly. The wildflowers that covered the hillsides in July, purple and yellow and white. The way the creek ran clear and cold, full of trout. The sky so blue it hurt to look at, stretching forever in every direction. Sounds like a different world, Evelyn said. It is. You'd like it. He paused. We could have a real garden, grow vegetables, maybe some herbs. Uncle used to have strawberries. I could rebuild that patch for you. I'd like that. They were planning a future neither of them was sure they'd live to see, but it helped, gave them something to hold on to besides fear. Around midnight, Coulter heard it. A crack, sharp and loud, cutting through even the storm's roar. He was on his feet instantly. What was that? Evelyn tried to sit up. Stay down! Coulter grabbed the lantern, moved toward the door. Another crack, and this time he felt it. A shudder running through the cabin's frame. The roof beam. He scrambled up through the hatch, lantern held high. The main support beam that ran the length of the cabin had split. Not all the way through, but enough. The weight of the snow was buckling it. If it gave way completely, the roof would collapse. They'd be buried alive. Coulter climbed back down, his mind racing. We need to brace the beam. Now. With what? He looked around the cabin. They didn't have spare lumber. Everything was being used, except the bed frame, he said. Coulter, no. Where will we sleep? On the floor, if we're alive. He was already pulling the thin mattress off, revealing the wooden frame underneath. It was old but solid, made from thick pine. Help me get this apart. Evelyn pulled herself across the floor, ankle dragging, and together they dismantled the bed frame. It took precious minutes they didn't have. Another crack sounded above them, and dust sifted down from the ceiling. Coulter climbed back onto the roof with two of the longest boards, rope, and nails. The wind nearly knocked him off immediately. He couldn't see anything, could barely breathe, but he felt along the beam until he found the crack, then lashed the boards against it, creating a splint. He drove nails through the boards and into solid wood, working by feel more than sight. His hands were numb again. The nails kept slipping. One of them fell through a gap in the roof boards and was lost to the snow below. He had 4 nails left. They had to be enough. When he finally climbed back down, he was shaking so hard he could barely stand. Evelyn pulled him to the fire, stripped off his frozen coat, wrapped him in blankets. Did it work? She asked. Don't know. Maybe. He couldn't feel his fingers at all now. 3 of them were white, the skin waxy. Frostbite. We'll find out if we wake up tomorrow. She made him put his hands in lukewarm water, gradually increasing the temperature. The pain when feeling returned was worse than anything he'd experienced. He gritted his teeth, refused to make a sound, but Evelyn saw anyway. You're going to lose those fingers if we're not careful, she said. I know. We need to keep them warm and dry. No more roof work. If the beam fails, then it fails and we deal with it. But you're no good to either of us with dead fingers. Her voice was sharp, almost angry. You hear me? No more. He nodded, too exhausted to argue. They slept on the floor that night, the mattress between them and the boards. It was less comfortable, but neither of them cared. They were alive. The roof was holding. That was enough. Days blurred together after that. Coulter's fingers recovered, slowly, painfully. But he kept them bandaged and avoided going outside unless absolutely necessary. Evelyn's ankle improved too, the swelling going down, though she still couldn't put weight on it. They were running low on everything: food, firewood, coffee, hope. The storm showed no signs of stopping. Coulter had lost track of what day it was. Could have been a week since it started, could have been 2. He started sleeping more, which scared him. He knew what that meant. The cold was getting to him, seeping into his bones, making his body want to shut down. Evelyn noticed. She'd wake him up every few hours, make him drink water, make him eat even when he wasn't hungry. Stay with me, she'd say, and he'd force himself awake. One night, or day, he couldn't tell anymore. She was the one who seemed off. Her forehead was hot when he touched it. Fever. I'm fine, she insisted, but her teeth were chattering. She wasn't fine. The cold, the stress, the injury, it had all caught up with her. Her body was giving up. Coulter stripped off his shirt, pulled her close, wrapped them both in every blanket they had. Skin to skin, sharing heat, because if her temperature kept rising, she'd burn out and there wasn't a damn thing he could do about it out here. Tell me about the strawberries, she whispered against his chest. What? The strawberry patch. You said your uncle had one. So he told her. Made up details he didn't remember, painting a picture of fat red berries warm from the sun, the way they'd taste fresh picked, juice running down your chin. He told her about lazy summer afternoons and clear skies and every good thing he could think of that wasn't this frozen hell they were trapped in. She fell asleep in his arms. Her fever broke sometime before dawn. When she woke, weak but clear-eyed, Coulter realized something had changed between them again. They'd crossed another line. He'd held her like she was precious, and she'd let him. Thank you, she said quietly. For what? Not giving up on me. Never would. Even though I'm useless right now, you're not useless. You're hurt. There's a difference. He brushed hair back from her face, surprised by how natural the gesture felt. Besides, you kept me alive too. All that rationing, making the food stretch. I would have run out by now if you hadn't been managing it. We make a good team. Yeah, we do. Outside, the wind was finally dying down. Not stopping, but lessening. Coulter moved to the window, scraped away frost. The snow had stopped falling. The sky was still gray, but lighter. Breaks in the clouds. I think it's ending, he said. Evelyn limped over, leaning heavily on a makeshift crutch he'd made from a broom handle. Together they stared out at the devastated landscape. Snow was piled higher than the cabin's roof in some places. The barn was partially buried. Everything looked like a different world. How long do you think it lasted? She asked. 8 days, maybe 9. And we made it. We made it. They stood there, two people who'd survived something that should have killed them. Coulter felt Evelyn's hand find his. Her fingers were thin. They'd both lost weight during the storm, but her grip was strong. What happens now? She asked. I need to dig out the barn, check on the animals, hope they survived. He squeezed her hand. Then we figure out how to make it to spring. Together. Together, he agreed. The storm had broken something in both of them and rebuilt it into something new. They weren't strangers anymore, weren't just partners in survival. Somewhere between the fear and the cold and the desperate nights fighting to stay alive, they'd become something else. What that was exactly, Coulter couldn't name yet, but he knew it mattered. Knew that when he'd held Evelyn through her fever, when she'd kept him from giving up, they'd made promises without words. And maybe that was enough. For now. The silence after the storm was worse than the noise. Coulter stood in the doorway, shovel in hand, staring at what the blizzard had left behind. The world looked like it had been beaten flat and then rebuilt wrong. Drifts taller than a man blocked the path to the barn. The chicken coop had collapsed completely, just splintered wood poking through the snow. The fence line had disappeared under white that stretched unbroken to the tree line. Behind him, Evelyn was trying to stand without the crutch. He'd heard her fall twice already, followed by muffled cursing that would have made him smile under different circumstances. Don't, he said without turning around. I need to be able to walk. You need to not re-break your ankle. He stepped outside, sank immediately to his thighs in snow. Stay inside, keep the fire going, I'll handle the barn. Coulter, but he was already wading forward, using the shovel to probe for the rope buried somewhere beneath his feet. It took him 20 minutes to find it. The hemp was frozen stiff, crusted with ice, but intact. Small miracle. The barn was in worse shape than he'd feared. Part of the roof had caved in on the south side, and when he finally got the door open, the smell hit him first. Death and manure and fear. 2 chickens were dead, frozen solid in the corner where they'd huddled together. The others were alive but barely, listless and cold. The horses were standing, which was something. Ash nickered when he saw Coulter, a sound that was almost accusatory. Where were you? The cattle were the real problem. 3 of them were down. 1 was clearly dead, had been for days based on the stiffness of the body. The other 2 were still breathing, but their eyes were dull and their ribs showed stark under winter coats that should have kept them warm. The 4th cow, the stubborn heifer that had given them trouble during the storm, was on her feet but swaying. Coulter stood there in the ruined barn, looking at the corpse of his herd, and felt something break inside his chest. These animals were supposed to carry them through winter, supposed to be the foundation of everything he was trying to build, and he'd failed them. He should have checked sooner, should have risked it, should have done something. The sound that came out of him wasn't quite a shout, wasn't quite a sob, just raw frustration and grief compressed into noise. He slammed his fist into the barn wall, felt wood crack, didn't care. Coulter? He spun around. Evelyn was in the doorway, leaning heavily on her crutch, face pale from the effort of getting here. I told you to stay inside, and I told you I'm not useless. She limped forward, saw the dead cow, stopped. Her expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Understanding. How bad? Bad enough. His voice came out flat. Lost one for sure. 2 more probably won't make it. Even if the heifer survives, one cow isn't enough to rebuild a herd. Evelyn moved past him, awkward on the crutch, and knelt beside one of the downed cattle. She put her hand on its neck, feeling for warmth, for a pulse. This one's still fighting. Fighting doesn't matter if she can't stand. Then we help her stand. Evelyn, she's done. They're both done. You don't know that. She looked up at him, and there was steel in her gaze. Get me some rope and blankets. We're going to try. It's a waste of... It's not your decision alone anymore. She said it quietly, but firm. We're partners, remember? So we try. If she dies anyway, fine. But we try first. Coulter wanted to argue, wanted to explain that you didn't waste resources on lost causes, that ranching meant making hard choices, that sometimes you had to let things die. But looking at Evelyn kneeling in dirty straw with her injured ankle and her stubborn jaw, he realized she already knew all that. She just didn't care. So they tried. They rigged a sling from rope and blankets, looped it under the cow's belly, and hauled. The animal fought them weakly, legs scrabbling for purchase. Coulter pulled until his shoulders screamed, until his frostbitten fingers felt like they'd tear open. Evelyn braced the cow's hindquarters, pushing, her face twisted with effort and pain. The cow got her front legs under her, swayed, almost went down again. Go on. Come on, Evelyn was saying, half prayer, half command. Come on, you stubborn thing, stand up. And somehow, impossibly, the cow stood. She was shaking, ribs heaving, but vertical. Coulter stared. He'd seen dying cattle before. They didn't just stand back up because someone asked nicely. Feed, Evelyn said, breathless. She needs feed and water. They got food and water into all three surviving cattle. The other downed cow couldn't be saved. She died while they were working, a quiet expiration that Coulter felt more than saw. But the one they'd helped stand stayed up, weak but alive. By the time they finished with the animals, Coulter's entire body was shaking from exhaustion. Evelyn looked worse, her face gray, clearly in pain but refusing to acknowledge it. Inside, Coulter said, now. She didn't argue this time. Back in the cabin, he made her sit while he checked her ankle. The wrapping had come loose during the struggle with the cow, and the joint was swollen again, angry purple spreading up her calf. You set yourself back a week, he said. Worth it. Was it? For one cow that might still die? For the chance. She met his eyes. Everything we're doing is for the chance, Coulter. If we only did things we were sure would work, we'd have given up before the storm even hit. He wanted to be angry with her, wanted to lecture her about practicality and survival and not taking stupid risks. But she was right, and they both knew it. You're impossible, he said instead. I've been called worse. She winced as he rewrapped the ankle, tighter this time. What about the dead one? I'll deal with it. How? Butcher what I can before it spoils completely. The rest... He shrugged. Drag it far from the barn. Let the scavengers have it. It took him the rest of the day to butcher the cow. His hands were clumsy from the cold and the lingering frostbite damage, and he kept having to stop to warm them. The work was grim, bloody, his knife slipping on frozen hide. But when he was done, they had meat. Not as much as he'd hoped. The animal had been starving. There wasn't much on her bones, but enough to stretch their supplies another few weeks. He dragged what remained of the carcass 100 yards from the barn into a shallow ravine where the snow wasn't as deep. His back was screaming by the time he finished. Everything hurt. He stood there, breathing hard, looking at the stripped bones and frozen blood, and wondered how many more things would die before winter released its grip. That's when he heard them, distant at first. A sound that could have been wind, except the air was still now. He turned slowly, scanning the tree line. Yellow eyes stared back. Wolves. Coulter's stomach went cold. He counted 6 of them, maybe more in the shadows between the trees. Big ones, winter lean and desperate. They'd smelled the blood, smelled death, and now they were watching him with an intensity that said they were calculating whether he was prey or predator. He backed away slowly, not running, keeping his eyes on the pack. One of them, the alpha, had to be, took a step forward. Testing. Coulter grabbed the shovel he'd been using, held it like a weapon. Get back! The wolf paused, but it didn't retreat. Coulter kept moving backwards step by careful step until he reached the barn. Then he turned and ran, shovel still in hand, not stopping until he was inside the cabin with the door barred. Evelyn looked up from the stove where she was making something that might generously be called soup. "What's wrong?" "Wolves." He was breathing too hard. "Pack of them, at least 6. They found the carcass." Her face went pale. "Will they come for the livestock?" "Maybe. Probably." He set the shovel down, moved to the window. Nothing visible now, but he knew they were out there. "They're starving. Storm was hard on them too. They'll go after easy prey. The cattle are easy prey. Yeah." They looked at each other, the implications settling heavy between them. 3 cattle left, 1 barely recovered. If the wolves took them, that was it. No herd, no future. "We have to protect them," Evelyn said. "I know." How? Coulter thought. The barn was damaged, gaps in the roof and walls where wolves could potentially get in. The cattle were weak, couldn't defend themselves, and there were only 2 humans against a whole pack. "I'll sleep in the barn," he said finally. "Keep watch. If they come, You'll what? Fight 6 wolves alone?" "You have a better idea?" "Yes, we both keep watch. Take shifts. That way at least one of us is alert." "You can barely walk." "I can sit. I can hold a rifle. I can shoot." She stood, wobbled, caught herself on the table. "Don't tell me I can't help. Your ankle." "My ankle is irrelevant if we lose everything." Her voice was sharp. "We do this together or we fail together. Choose." Coulter looked at her, this woman who'd shown up 3 weeks ago knowing nothing about ranching or survival, who'd fought through a blizzard and a busted ankle and never once complained, who was standing there now ready to face down wolves with a leg that could barely support her weight. "Together," he said quietly. "But if it gets bad, you go back to the cabin. Promise me." "I promise." She limped to the corner where he kept the rifles, pulled one down, checked the chamber with practiced ease. "Where did you learn to shoot?" "My father, before he died." She loaded the rifle, movements sure despite her shaking hands. He said a woman should know how to protect herself. Guess he was right. They gathered what they needed: rifles, ammunition, blankets, a lantern. Coulter helped Evelyn to the barn, supporting most of her weight. Inside, they set up a watch post in the loft where they could see the whole interior. The surviving cattle were huddled together below, the horses nervous and stamping. Night fell fast this time of year. Within an hour, the only light was from their lantern, casting jumping shadows across the barn walls. "Tell me about them," Evelyn said quietly. "The wolves. What are they thinking?" "They're thinking we're between them and food." Coulter scanned the darkness beyond the barn door, which he'd left cracked open so he could see out. "They're smart, patient. They'll test us, look for weakness. If they think they can take us, they will. And if they can't, then they'll wait. Wolves can wait a long time." Hours passed. Coulter's eyes burned from staring into the dark. Beside him, Evelyn was quiet but alert, rifle across her lap. Every sound made them tense. Wind against wood, a horse shifting, the settling creak of the damaged roof. Around midnight, Coulter saw movement, a shadow detaching from other shadows, low to the ground, circling the barn. Then another, and another. "They're here," he whispered. Evelyn raised her rifle. "How many?" "Can't tell. At least 3. The wolves moved like smoke, barely visible even in the moonlight reflecting off snow. Coulter tracked one as it approached the barn door, nose low, scenting. The alpha. Had to be. Bigger than the others, moving with authority. It paused at the threshold, yellow eyes gleaming in the lantern light. Coulter fired. The shot was deliberately high, meant to scare, not kill. The bullet splintered wood above the wolf's head and the animal bolted, the whole pack scattering into the darkness. "That'll buy us a few hours," Coulter said. "Then what?" "Then they come back and we do it again." But when they came back, it was different. Coulter was dozing despite himself when Evelyn grabbed his arm. "Listen." He heard it. A scratching sound. Not from the door, from the roof. They looked up. Through the gaps where the roof had caved in, he could see movement. A wolf had climbed onto the barn, was testing the damaged section, looking for a way in, Smart bastards, Coulter muttered. He aimed at the gap, fired again, yelp of pain, scrabbling retreat. But now he knew they were thinking three-dimensionally. The barn wasn't a fortress, it was a box with holes. We can't keep this up all night, Evelyn said. Don't have a choice. There's always a choice. She was looking at something, her expression calculating. The carcass. It's still out there, right? Yeah, why? Because that's what they really want, not the cattle. The easy meal. She turned to him. What if we gave them a reason to focus on that instead of us? They're already focused on it. That's why they're here. But they know we're protecting the barn. So they're trying to get through us to reach new prey. What if we made it clear the barn is defended, but the carcass isn't? Coulter understood what she was suggesting. You want to let them have it. I want them to think they outsmarted us. Let them take the carcass, fill their bellies, move on. If they're fed, they won't risk fighting us for more. It made sense. Brutal sense, the kind that survived frontier winters. But it meant leaving the barn, leading the wolves away from the livestock, and hoping they took the bait instead of deciding humans were easier prey. I'll do it, Coulter said. No, I will. You can't walk. I can shoot better than you. She said it flatly, stating fact, not boasting. You've seen me. I don't miss. You need someone who can drop a wolf in one shot if this goes wrong. Evelyn, we don't have time to argue. She was already moving, awkward with the crutch, but determined. I'll position on the cabin porch. You make noise at the barn, drive them toward the ravine. I'll cover you if they turn aggressive. Every instinct Coulter had screamed against this plan. But she was right about the shooting. He'd seen her handle that rifle, steady and sure. And they were out of options. Stay on the porch, he said. Don't come down. If they charge, get inside and bar the door. If they charge you, then shoot them. They moved fast. Coulter helped Evelyn to the cabin, got her settled on the porch with the rifle and extra ammunition. The moonlight was bright enough to shoot by, reflecting off the snow in shades of silver and blue. Be careful, she said. Always am. That's a lie, but I appreciate the effort. Despite everything, Coulter smiled. Then he headed back toward the barn, making noise as he went, banging the shovel against the walls, shouting, herding the wolves away from the livestock and toward the carcass. The pack materialized from the darkness, 6 of them visible now, maybe more he couldn't see. They spread out, flanking him, yellow eyes calculating. The alpha hung back, watching. Coulter kept moving, kept making noise, leading them toward the ravine. The carcass was still there, frozen blood black in the moonlight. He could smell it now, death and meat and the promise of food for things that were starving. One of the younger wolves broke ranks, lunged toward the carcass. The alpha snarled, a sound that raised every hair on Coulter's neck, but the younger one didn't back down. Hunger won over hierarchy. The pack descended on the carcass. Coulter backed away slowly, giving them space, not making eye contact. This was their kill now. He was just a witness. He was halfway back to the barn when one of them noticed he was leaving. The alpha. It stepped away from the feeding frenzy, blood on its muzzle, and locked eyes with Coulter. The message was clear. This isn't over. Then the wolf turned and headed not toward the carcass, but toward the barn. No! Coulter broke into a run. No! 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 Oh! The wolf was faster. It hit the barn door at full speed, slamming through the gap Coulter had left open. Inside, the cattle bellowed in terror. The horses screamed. Coulter grabbed for his rifle, but it was back at the barn, propped against the wall. He had the shovel, just the shovel. He charged through the door. The wolf had the weakest cow cornered, teeth snapping at her throat. She was down, kicking weakly. The other cattle were panicking, ramming the walls. The whole barn was chaos. Coulter swung the shovel, caught the wolf across the ribs. It yelped, turned on him, and he saw death in those yellow eyes. It gathered itself to spring. The rifle shot cracked like thunder. The wolf dropped mid-leap, so close Coulter felt the air from its passage. It hit the ground at his feet, dead, a clean hole through its skull. He spun around. Evelyn was in the barn doorway, balanced on one leg, rifle still raised. Her face was white as snow, mouth set in a grim line. I told you to stay on the porch, Coulter said, his voice shaking. And I told you I don't take orders well. She lowered the rifle, swayed. Coulter caught her before she fell. Is the cow... I don't know. I don't care. He held her tight, feeling her heart hammering against his chest. You could have been killed. So could you. That's not the point. Then what is? He pulled back just enough to look at her. The point is I can't lose you, all right? I can't. I already lost everything else. The herd's half dead, winter's barely started, this whole place is falling apart. But I can't lose you. Evelyn stared at him, something shifting in her expression. Coulter, I know what we agreed. Partners. Practical. Nothing we couldn't walk away from. The words were coming out wrong. Too honest. But he couldn't stop them. But somewhere between the storm and tonight, and you standing in a barn with a broken ankle facing down wolves, it stopped being just practical. And I don't know what to call it, but I know I can't lose it. You won't. Her hand found his face, cold fingers against his jaw. I'm not going anywhere. You should. You should get on the first train back east once this winter ends and find someone who isn't... She kissed him. It was brief, awkward, their noses bumping, both of them shaking from adrenaline and cold. But it was real. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright. I don't want someone who isn't. I want you. Broken barn and dying cattle and wolves and all of it. I want this life we're building because it's ours. Do you understand? Coulter couldn't speak. He just nodded. Outside, the wolves had dragged the carcass away from the ravine, their snarling carrying on the night air. But they weren't coming back to the barn. They'd made their choice. Inside the barn, the wounded cow was still alive, bleeding from scratches but not dying. The other cattle had calmed. The horses were settling. They'd survived. Again, Coulter helped Evelyn sit, checked her ankle, swollen worse than ever, but she'd deal with that later. Then he dragged the dead wolf outside, far from the barn. Let the pack take it if they wanted. Another message. We'll defend what's ours. By the time he got back inside, Evelyn had fallen asleep sitting up, rifle still in her lap, exhaustion finally claiming her. Coulter took the weapon carefully, set it aside, and wrapped her in blankets. He stayed awake the rest of the night, keeping watch. The wolves didn't return. By dawn, their tracks led away from the ranch, back into the mountains. When Evelyn woke, she found him sitting beside her, and the first thing she said was, "We made it." "Yeah," Coulter said. "We did." The morning sun was weak, pale through thin clouds, but it was there. Another day, another chance. They made it back to the cabin together, Evelyn leaning on Coulter more than the crutch now, both of them filthy and exhausted and alive. Inside, he built up the fire while she collapsed into the chair. "I shot a wolf," she said, like she was testing the reality of it. "You saved my life." "I guess we're even then." "Not even close." Coulter knelt in front of her, started unwrapping her ankle again. It looked terrible, swollen, bruised, hot to the touch. "You need to stay off this for at least a week. No arguments." "A week? Coulter, we have work." "I'll handle it. You handled everything during the storm when I was useless with frostbite. Now it's your turn to let someone else carry the weight." He looked up at her. "Please." Something in his voice made her stop protesting. "All right, a week." He got her settled in bed, made her drink water, wrapped her ankle in fresh bandages. By the time he finished, she was already half asleep again, body finally giving in to the exhaustion it had been fighting. Coulter stepped outside into the cold morning. The valley stretched before him, white and silent. The mountains loomed unchanged. The ranch looked like it had been through a war, which, in a way, it had. But they were still here, still fighting. And for the first time since winter started, Coulter let himself believe they might actually survive it. Coulter woke on Christmas Eve to silence and the smell of pine. For a moment, still half in sleep, he thought he'd imagined it. But no. There it was again, fresh pine, sharp and clean, completely out of place in the cabin that had smelled like smoke and unwashed bodies for weeks. He opened his eyes. Evelyn was sitting at the table, her injured ankle propped on a stool, weaving pine branches into something that might generously be called a decoration. Her fingers were clumsy with the cold. The branches kept slipping, but she persisted with that same stubborn determination she brought to everything. "What are you doing?" His voice came out rough. She didn't look up. "It's Christmas Eve." So I'm making this place look less like we're waiting to die in it." She managed to tie off one branch, started on another. "Help me or don't, but stop staring." Coulter sat up, every muscle protesting. The week since the wolf attack had been brutal. He'd been doing the work of two people while Evelyn's ankle healed, and his body was reminding him he wasn't as young as he used to be. "Where'd you get the pine?" Crawled to the door, cut branches from the tree growing too close to the cabin anyway. "You said it was a fire hazard." "I said that a month ago." And I remembered. She finally looked at him, and there was something in her expression he couldn't read. Not quite happiness, but something lighter than the grim survival mode they'd been living in. "It's Christmas Eve, Coulter. We made it this far. That's worth marking." He wanted to argue that they hadn't made it anywhere yet, that winter was barely half over, that celebrating was premature. But looking at her sitting there with pine needles in her hair and that determined set to her jaw, he couldn't bring himself to say it. "What do you need me to do?" he asked instead. Her smile was small but genuine. "There's more branches by the door, and I found candles in the supply chest. We could make it look almost festive." They spent the morning transforming the cabin. It wasn't much. Pine branches laid across the mantel, a few precious candles arranged on the table. The floor swept clean for the first time in weeks. But when they finished and stepped back to look at it, something had shifted. The cabin felt less like a survival shelter and more like a home. "It's nice," Coulter said quietly. "Don't sound so surprised." Evelyn was leaning heavily on her crutch, ankle still too weak to bear full weight, but her eyes were bright. "People have been celebrating holidays in worse conditions than this." "Yeah, I suppose they have." She sat down carefully, adjusting her ankle with a wince she tried to hide. Coulter noticed anyway. He'd gotten good at reading her small tells, the way her jaw tightened when the pain was bad, how she'd go quiet and still when she was fighting exhaustion. "How's it feel?" he asked. "Better. I can put some weight on it now. Some isn't enough. It's more than yesterday." She looked at him defiant. "I'll be back to full strength soon." "In time for what? More blizzards? More wolves?" "In time for whatever comes next." Her voice was firm. "I'm not staying useless forever." Coulter pulled out the other chair, sat across from her. The candles cast shadows that made her face all angles and planes, beautiful in a way he hadn't let himself notice before. Or maybe he'd noticed and just hadn't admitted it. "You were never useless," he said. "Even laid up, you've been keeping this place running, rationing food, managing supplies, keeping me from working myself to death." "Someone has to." "Yeah, someone does." He hesitated, then reached across the table. His hand found hers, scarred and calloused now from work she'd never done before coming here. "I need to tell you something." Evelyn's fingers curled around his. "All right. I've been thinking about what you said, after the wolves, about this being ours." He was terrible at this, words tangling in his throat. "And you were right, it is ours. But the thing is, legally, it's not." She frowned. "What do you mean?" "The ranch, the land. It's all in my name. You're my wife, yeah. But if something happened to me..." He couldn't quite meet her eyes. "You'd have nothing, no legal claim. My uncle's family back east could contest it, take it from you. You'd be back where you started." Coulter, "Let me finish." He pulled his hand back, stood, moved to the small desk in the corner. From the bottom drawer, he withdrew a leather folder he'd been working on in secret whenever Evelyn was asleep. Inside were papers, legal documents he'd painstakingly filled out by candlelight. "I had these drawn up before I went to meet you at the station. Was going to do it proper with a lawyer in town, but that obviously didn't happen." He laid the papers on the table in front of her. Evelyn looked down, started reading. Her eyes went wide. "This is a deed." "Yeah. With my name on it. Joint ownership, 50-50. Everything I have, you have equal claim to." He watched her face, trying to gauge her reaction. "I know we married out of necessity. I know this wasn't what you signed up for, but you've earned this, Evelyn. Every frozen morning, every night standing watch, every time you pushed through pain to keep us going. This place is as much yours as mine." She was quiet for a long time, just staring at the papers. When she finally looked up, there were tears tracking down her face. "Why? Why what? Why would you do this? You don't know me. Not really. I could take this and leave, sell my half, take the money, disappear." "You could." Coulter sat back down. "But you won't." "How do you know?" "Because you're still here. You could have given up a dozen times by now. During the storm, when you hurt your ankle, when the wolves came. But you didn't. You stayed and you fought and you proved that you're not someone who runs when things get hard. He reached across the table again, took both her hands this time. I trust you, Evelyn. Maybe I'm a fool for it, but I do. You're not a fool. Her voice was barely a whisper. You're the most honest person I've ever met. Then be honest with me. Do you want this? Not out of obligation or survival, or because you don't have anywhere else to go. Do you actually want to stay here, build this life, make it ours? Evelyn was crying openly now, not bothering to wipe the tears away. Yes, I want it so badly it scares me. Why does it scare you? Because I've never had anything worth losing before. She squeezed his hands hard. Everything I cared about got taken away. My family, my home, every chance I thought I had at a different life. And now I'm sitting here in a half-broken cabin in the middle of nowhere with a man I've known for less than a month. And it feels more like home than anywhere I've ever been. That terrifies me. Coulter understood that fear, had been living with his own version of it since the moment he'd seen her step off that train. The fear of hoping for something, of letting himself want it, only to watch it slip away. I can't promise it won't be hard, he said. It will be. Probably harder than anything either of us has faced. But I can promise I won't give up on it. On us. On this. He gestured at the cabin, the ranch beyond it, the life they were trying to build. Whatever comes, we face it together. Evelyn pulled one hand free, pressed it against his cheek. Her palm was warm despite the cold that seeped through every crack in the walls. Ask me properly. What? You married me in the middle of a blizzard with a handshake. I shot a wolf for you. I think I've earned a proper proposal. There was a hint of smile through the tears. So ask me properly, Coulter Hayes. He should have felt ridiculous, kneeling on the rough cabin floor in front of a woman he'd known for 3 weeks. But looking up at her, seeing the hope and fear and fierce determination in her eyes, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Evelyn Mercer Hayes, he started, then stopped. Or is it still Mercer? We never actually... Hayes, she said it firmly. It's Hayes. Keep going. Evelyn Hayes, I'm asking you to marry me. Again. Not because I need help surviving winter, or because you answered an ad in a newspaper, but because somewhere between that train station and this moment, you became the person I want to survive for. His voice cracked. I'm asking you to stay. To build this life with me. To take the good days and the bad ones and everything in between. Will you? Yes? She was pulling him up before he could say anything else, her arms around his neck, her face buried against his shoulder. Yes, yes, yes. They held each other in the candlelit cabin, two people who'd started as strangers and become something neither of them had names for yet. Outside, snow was starting to fall again. Light flurries, nothing like the monster storm that had nearly killed them, but enough to dust the world white. When they finally pulled apart, Evelyn was smiling despite the tears. I don't have anything to give you. Don't need anything. Everyone needs something for Christmas. She looked around the cabin, searching, then her eyes landed on something. Wait here. She limped to the corner where she'd been sleeping while her ankle healed, dug through the canvas bag she'd brought from Philadelphia. When she came back, she was holding a small book, the cover worn soft from handling. It's poetry, she said, almost apologetic. Whitman. Only thing I kept from before. I've read it so many times I have half of it memorized, but she placed it in his hands. It's yours now, if you want it. Coulter opened the book carefully. The pages were thin, marked with notes and margins, certain passages underlined. He could see her in these marks, her thoughts and reactions preserved in fading ink. I want it, he said. Thank you. They sat together at the table, sharing the thin soup Evelyn had made stretch for dinner, reading passages from the book aloud. Coulter stumbled over words he didn't know, but Evelyn didn't correct him, just listened like what he was saying mattered. As the candles burned lower, she leaned against his shoulder. Tell me what you want for next Christmas. Next Christmas? We're going to survive this winter, so tell me, what do you want a year from now? Coulter thought about it. A year ago, he would have said a bigger herd, more land, prosperity measured in cattle and crops. But now, with Evelyn warm against his side and the cabin feeling like something worth protecting, His answer was different. This, he said, but easier. The hard work without the fear. You, healthy and safe. Maybe a garden growing. The livestock fat and happy. A roof that doesn't leak. He paused. Is that too simple? No. It's perfect. They stayed up later than they should have, feeding the fire, talking about nothing and everything. Evelyn told him about books she'd read, stories she remembered. Coulter told her about the valley in summer, painting pictures with words of things she hadn't seen yet but would. Somewhere past midnight, they finally went to bed. The mattress was back on the frame. Coulter had rebuilt it from salvaged wood after the roof crisis, and they lay facing each other in the darkness. "Merry Christmas," Evelyn whispered. "Merry Christmas." She kissed him, soft and tentative, like she was still learning the shape of it. Coulter kissed her back, one hand cupping her face, thumb brushing away tears he felt but couldn't see. When they broke apart, she curled against his chest, her breathing evening out toward sleep. Coulter held her, feeling the steady beat of her heart, and let himself believe in the future they'd promised each other. Morning came cold and clear. Coulter woke to find Evelyn already up, dressed in her warmest clothes, testing weight on her ankle. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Getting ready." She took a few careful steps, wobbling but staying upright. "We're going to town." "Evelyn, your ankle is good enough. And before you argue, think about when we'll get another clear day. The snow's light, the wind's down, and I'm tired of being trapped in this cabin." She looked at him, chin raised in challenge. "We're going to town, finding whoever can make our marriage legal on paper and doing this right. Agreed?" Coulter wanted to argue, wanted to point out all the risks. Another storm, her ankle giving out, the long ride there and back. But he also understood what she was really asking for. She wanted this settled, wanted the papers signed and the promises made official so there was no question, no doubt. "Agreed," he said. "But we take it slow. Any sign your ankle's failing, we turn back." "Deal." They prepared carefully, bundling in layers, packing supplies in case they got caught out. Coulter saddled Ash, helped Evelyn mount, then climbed up behind her. She leaned back against his chest as they started down the valley, following ruts in the snow that marked the road. The ride took 4 hours. Evelyn's ankle was clearly hurting by the end. She'd gone pale and quiet, but she didn't complain. The town of Bent Creek was barely worthy of the name. A dozen buildings clustered around a crossroads, half of them looking abandoned. But there was a general store, a saloon, and a small office with a sign that read, "Justice of the Peace." The justice was a dried-up man named Horace Finch, who looked like winter might carry him off any day. But his hands were steady as he witnessed their signatures on the marriage certificate, and his voice was firm when he pronounced them legally wed. "You picked a hell of a winner for this," Finch said, stamping the document. "Didn't have much choice in timing," Coulter replied. "Never do, I suppose." The old man looked at Evelyn. "You sure about this, miss? It's not too late to change your mind." "I'm sure." She signed her name with a flourish. "More sure than I've been about anything." Finch nodded, filed the papers. "Then congratulations. Try not to freeze to death before spring." They stopped at the general store next, trading what little they could spare for coffee and flour. The storekeeper, a woman named Mrs. Chen, took one look at Evelyn and disappeared into the back room. She returned with a small cloth bundle. "For you," she said, pressing it into Evelyn's hands. "Wedding gift." Inside was a length of white ribbon and a small tin of tea. Not much, but out here it was luxury. "Thank you," Evelyn said, her voice tight. "You need anything? You come to town. We take care of our own out here." Mrs. Chen's eyes were kind. Winter's hard enough without being alone. They started the ride back as afternoon light was already fading. Coulter could feel Evelyn flagging, her body heavy against his, but she stayed conscious, stayed aware. Halfway home, she spoke. "Stop for a minute. You all right?" "I'm fine. Just stop." Coulter reined Ash to a halt. Evelyn slid down carefully, limped a few steps away, and stood looking at the valley spread below them. The ranch was visible in the distance, small and fragile against the vast white landscape. "What are you doing?" Coulter asked. "Looking at our home." She turned to him, and in the fading light, her face was radiant. "I wanted to see it like this, from a distance, so I'd remember what we're fighting for." Coulter dismounted, went to stand beside her. From here, the cabin looked tiny, almost insignificant. But smoke was rising from the chimney. He'd banked the fire before they left, and the barn was still standing, and the valley stretched around it with a wild beauty that never failed to stun him. "It's not much," he said. "It's everything." Evelyn took his hand. "It's ours. That makes it everything." They made it back as full dark was settling. Coulter got Evelyn inside first, then tended to Ash, moving fast in the bitter cold. When he returned to the cabin, she'd built up the fire and was heating water for the tea Mrs. Chen had given them. "Successful day?" Coulter asked, shedding his frozen coat. "Very." She poured tea into 2 tin cups, handed him one. "We're legally married, we have supplies, and we're still alive. I'd call that successful." They sat together by the fire, sipping tea that tasted like luxury after weeks of nothing but coffee and melted snow. Outside, the temperature was dropping, but inside the cabin was warm, almost comfortable. "Evelyn?" Coulter said after a while. "Yeah?" "I meant what I said, about this being yours, about us building it together." "I know." She set down her tea, moved to sit beside him on the floor in front of the fire. "I meant what I said, too. I'm not going anywhere." He kissed her then, properly, without the urgency of survival or the fear of loss. Just 2 people who'd chosen each other, repeatedly, through every hardship winter could throw at them. When they finally went to bed, Evelyn curled tight against him, her injured ankle carefully positioned, her breathing steady and sure. "Next Christmas," she murmured, already half asleep, "remind me how we spent this one." "Signing papers and drinking tea," Coulter said. "Perfect." A pause. "I love you." The words hung in this darkness. Coulter had heard them before, from Sarah, the woman who'd left. But these words felt different, earned through shared survival, through honesty, through all the ways they'd proven themselves to each other. "I love you too," he said, and meant it more than he'd ever meant anything. Evelyn made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a sob. "We're idiots. Falling in love in the middle of winter, with everything falling apart." "Probably." He held her closer. "But we're alive, and we're together, and tomorrow we'll still be both those things." "Promise?" "Promise." She fell asleep in his arms, safe and warm despite the cold pressing against the cabin walls. Coulter stayed awake longer, listening to her breathe, feeling the steady rhythm of her heart against his chest. Outside, wolves howled somewhere in the distant mountains. But they were far away now, hunting other prey, leaving the ranch alone. The snow fell softly, adding to drifts that would melt eventually when spring finally came. And in the morning, Coulter woke to find Evelyn already up, limping around the cabin on her healing ankle, humming something under her breath that might have been a song, or might have been just contentment given voice. "Coffee?" she asked when she saw he was awake. "Please." She brought him a cup, sat on the edge of the bed. "What's the plan today?" "Check the animals, repair the barn roof if the weather holds, chop more firewood." He sipped the coffee, bitter and perfect. "The usual." "Sounds good." She kissed his forehead, casual and familiar, like they'd been doing this for years instead of weeks. "I'll handle the cabin, get some real cleaning done." "Your ankle is fine, stop worrying." But Coulter would worry, would probably never stop worrying, not with winter still ahead and 1,000 things that could go wrong. But looking at Evelyn, seeing the determination in her eyes and the strength in her shoulders, he also felt something else. Hope. Real hope, not the desperate kind that came from having no other choice, the kind that believed tomorrow would come and they'd be there to meet it, together. The way they'd promised. The way they'd earned. The worst part about January was how it made December look gentle. Coulter had thought they'd seen the worst winter could offer. He was wrong. The cold in January went beyond discomfort into something that felt personal, malicious. It crept through every crack in the cabin walls, turned breath to ice before it left your lungs, made your bones ache just from existing. They woke one morning to find the water bucket frozen solid despite being kept inside near the fire. The windows had frost so thick on the inside you couldn't see through them. When Coulter tried to open the door, it wouldn't budge, frozen shut. "We're trapped," Evelyn said, her voice matter-of-fact despite the fear flickering in her eyes. "Not trapped, just stuck." Coulter grabbed the kettle, heated water on the stove, poured it along the doorframe. It took 3 kettles before the ice gave way enough to force the door open. Outside was a world that had given up pretending to be survivable. The cold hit like a physical blow. Coulter took one breath and felt his lungs seize. He slammed the door shut. "The animals," Evelyn said. "I know. If it's this cold in here, whoop." "I know." He was already pulling on every layer he owned, wrapping scarves around his face until only his eyes showed. "Stay inside. Keep the fire going. If I'm not back in an hour, don't come looking." "Coulter, promise me." She grabbed his arm, held tight. "1 hour, then I'm coming, whether you like it or not." He kissed her through the scarf, quick and clumsy, then stepped back into the cold. The trip to the barn was the longest 50 yards of his life. The rope was there but frozen stiff as iron, impossible to grip even through gloves. Coulter followed it hand over hand anyway, his fingers screaming protest. The wind wasn't strong, but the cold made up for it. 30 seconds outside and he couldn't feel his face. The barn door was frozen worse than the cabins. He had to kick it, throw his shoulder against it, finally use the shovel as a pry bar. When it gave way, he stumbled inside and the smell told him everything before his eyes adjusted. One of the chickens was dead. Just dead, frozen where it had been roosting. The cattle were huddled together, their breath coming in labored clouds. The horses were stamping, agitated, ice crusted on their muzzles. Coulter worked fast despite the cold that made every movement painful. Fresh straw for insulation, feed scattered. Ice broken from the water trough. It would freeze again within the hour, but it gave them a chance to drink. He checked each animal for frostbite, found the heifer's ears were black at the tips. Nothing he could do about that now. By the time he made it back to the cabin, his hands were white and numb. Evelyn stripped off his gloves, held his fingers in her own warm hands, her face tight with worry she wouldn't voice. "Bad?" she asked. "Lost a chicken. Heifer's got frostbite. The rest—" He shook his head. "They're suffering, but alive." "And you?" "Same." They fell into a new rhythm after that, darker than before. The cold was relentless, a presence that never left. They burned through firewood faster than Coulter had planned, which meant he had to make trips to the woodpile he'd covered outside. Trips that left him gasping and frozen each time. Food was running low too. The meat from the butchered cow was gone. They were down to potatoes, flour, a little cornmeal. Evelyn made meals that were more imagination than substance, stretching ingredients so thin they were eating ghosts of food. One night, Coulter watched her divide their dinner, a watery soup with a few potato chunks, and realized she was giving him the larger portion. Had been for days, maybe weeks. "Stop," he said. "Stop what?" "Giving me more. We split it even. You're doing the heavy work. You need— We're equal partners, remember? That means equal rations." He slid half his portion back into her bowl. "I'm not surviving this winter if you don't." Evelyn stared at the soup, then at him. "I'm scared we won't make it." It was the first time she'd admitted it out loud. Coulter reached across the table, took her hand. "Me too." "Really?" "Every damn day." He squeezed her fingers. "But being scared doesn't change what we have to do. We keep going, keep fighting, keep choosing to wake up tomorrow." "What if tomorrow's worse?" "Then we survive that too." She smiled, small and tired. "You make it sound simple." "It is simple, doesn't mean it's easy." They finished their thin soup in silence, then went to bed early to conserve candles. Lying in the dark with Evelyn's head on his chest, Coulter listened to the wind howl and thought about all the ways they could still die. Starvation, freezing, another storm, the cabin collapsing, sickness. The list was long and getting longer. But he also thought about how Evelyn's breathing had evened out, how she trusted him enough to sleep while he kept watch, how they'd built something between them that mattered more than survival. They'd built a reason to survive. That had to count for something. February brought a thaw that felt like mockery. 3 days of temperatures warm enough to melt the top layer of snow, to make them believe winter might be ending. Evelyn even talked about starting seeds inside for the garden. Then the temperature dropped again, harder than before, and everything that had melted refroze into a solid sheet of ice. The ranch became a skating rink, treacherous and impossible. Coulter slipped on his way to the barn, went down hard, felt something pop in his shoulder. The pain was immediate and blinding. He lay there on the ice, staring up at gray sky, trying to breathe through it. "Coulter," Evelyn was coming, moving too fast on the ice with her still weak ankle. "Stay there!" he shouted. "Don't—" She went down too, sliding across the ice, slamming into the side of the cabin. For a horrible moment, she didn't move. Then she groaned, rolled over. "I'm all right. Your ankle is fine. What about you?" "Shoulder. Think I dislocated it." They helped each other back inside, two broken people trying to be whole. Evelyn's ankle was swelling again, all the healing progress undone. Coulter's shoulder was on fire, the joint feeling wrong, disconnected. "I need to put it back," Evelyn said, her voice shaking. "You know how?" "I watched the factory doctor do it once, after a man got caught in machinery." She positioned herself behind him. "This is gonna hurt. Just do it." She pulled and twisted, and Coulter bit through his lip to keep from screaming. There was a pop, sickening and wet, and the pain shifted from unbearable to merely agonizing. "It's in," Evelyn said. She was crying. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "You did good." Coulter's vision was swimming. "You did what needed doing." They spent 2 days mostly immobile, healing. Evelyn could barely walk. Coulter couldn't lift his arm. The animals went unchecked because neither of them could make it to the barn without risking another fall on the ice. On the 3rd day, the ice melted enough to navigate. Coulter made the trip to find another chicken dead and the heifer down again. He got her up, barely, then stumbled back to report the news. "We're losing this fight," he said. Evelyn was grinding their last coffee beans, rationing even that now. "We haven't lost yet. We're close." "Close isn't the same as done." She poured the precious coffee, handed him a cup. "We still have food for another few weeks if we're careful. The worst of winter has to be behind us. We just need to hold on." What if holding on isn't enough? She sat across from him, and her eyes were fierce despite the exhaustion in her face, the way her hands shook slightly from hunger and cold. "Then we go down fighting, but we don't give up. We don't quit on each other. That's the promise we made." Coulter wanted to believe her, wanted to find that same fierce hope she carried. But he was so tired. Tired of being cold, tired of being hungry, tired of watching everything they'd fought for slip away piece by piece. "I don't know if I'm strong enough," he admitted. "You are." She took his hand, the one on his good arm. "And when you're not, I'll be strong for both of us. That's what we do. We take turns carrying each other." Looking at her, this woman who'd shown up 3 months ago knowing nothing about survival and had become the toughest person he'd ever met, Coulter felt something shift in his chest. Not hope exactly, more like determination, stubbornness. They'd made it this far. They could make it further. March arrived with the first real signs that winter might actually end someday. The days grew longer. The sun felt warmer, though the nights were still bitter. Snow started melting in earnest, revealing dead grass and frozen earth and the bones of the ranch they'd been fighting to save. The heifer died on March 3rd. Coulter found her in the morning, finally given up. He stood there looking at her corpse, feeling numb. They were down to 2 cattle and 2 horses now, barely enough to call a ranch. But when he told Evelyn, she just nodded. "We'll rebuild. When spring comes, we'll find a way." "With what money?" "We'll figure it out." She was cooking something that might charitably be called breakfast, flour and water fried into hard cakes. "People do it all the time. Start from nothing and build something." "We're not starting from nothing. We're starting from less than nothing. We're starting from each other." She slid the cakes onto plates, sat down across from him. "That's more than nothing." Coulter ate the tasteless food and tried to find her certainty in himself. They were alive. They'd survived the worst winter either of them had ever seen. That had to mean something. That night, lying in bed, Evelyn said, "Tell me about the garden again." "The garden?" "What we're going to plant, what it'll look like." She curled against him, seeking warmth. "I need to think about something growing instead of dying." So he told her. Made up details, painting a picture of neat rows of vegetables, herbs growing wild, maybe even flowers if they could spare the space. He described tomatoes fat and red in the summer heat, corn tall enough to hide in, beans climbing up stakes he'd build. "Strawberries," Evelyn murmured, half asleep. "You promised strawberries." "Yeah, we'll have strawberries. And I want chickens that actually survive. Happy chickens." "Happy chickens," he agreed, smiling despite everything. "Anything else?" "You. I want you there, healthy and whole." not broken and frozen. I want that too. She fell asleep in his arms, and Coulter stayed awake listening to the wind. It sounded different now, less violent, almost gentle. Spring was coming. They just had to survive long enough to meet it. The breakthrough came in mid-March, unexpected and strange. Coulter was outside checking the fence line when he heard hoofbeats. He looked up to see a rider approaching, the first human they'd seen since their trip to town in December. It was Horace Finch, the justice of the peace, looking even more dried up than before, but alive. "Thought I'd check on you two," Finch said, dismounting stiffly. "See if you made it through." "Barely," Coulter said honestly. "Heard it was a hard winter, lost a lot of folks." Finch looked around the ranch, taking in the damaged barn, the sparse livestock, the general air of barely controlled disaster. "But you're still here." "We're still here." Evelyn came out of the cabin, moving better on her ankle now, though she still favored it. "Mr. Finch, this is a surprise." "Mrs. Hayes." Finch tipped his hat. "I brought something for you." "Well, someone wanted me to bring it." He pulled an envelope from his coat. "Mrs. Chen from the store. She put together a collection from folks in town, for new settlers who made it through their first winter." Inside the envelope was money. Not a fortune, but enough to buy seed, a few chickens, maybe another cow. Coulter stared at it. "We can't accept this." "Why not?" "Because we didn't earn it." "You survived." Finch's voice was firm. "Out here, that's earning it. Besides, it's not charity. It's neighbors helping neighbors. You'll do the same for someone else someday." Evelyn took the envelope, her hands shaking. "Thank you. Tell Mrs. Chen, tell everyone. Thank you." After Finch left, they sat at the table and counted the money 3 times, making sure it was real. $40. Enough to rebuild. Enough to hope. "We can get chickens," Evelyn said, her voice full of something Coulter hadn't heard in months. Excitement. "And seed. Real seed for a real garden. And a cow. Maybe 2 if we find them cheap. We could fix the barn roof properly. And the cabin leaks." They were talking over each other now, planning, dreaming, believing for the first time that they might actually have a future beyond just survival. That night they made love for the first time since before Christmas. Gentle and careful, both of them still healing from winter's damage, but real. Afterward, lying tangled together with Evelyn's head on his shoulder, Coulter felt something break inside him. Not in a bad way. More like a dam releasing pressure he'd been holding back for months. He started crying. "Coulter?" Evelyn sat up, concerned. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. Everything." He couldn't stop the tears. "I thought we were going to die. I really thought this winter would kill us, and I'd lost you before I even really had you. But we didn't die." She wiped his tears with her thumbs, her own eyes wet. "We made it. We're here." "I love you," he said. "I know I said it before, but I don't think I understood what it meant. I understand now. It means I'd do this whole winter over again if it ended with you beside me." "You're an idiot," she said, but she was smiling. "A sweet idiot, but still an idiot." "Yeah, probably." She kissed him, salt from tears mixing between their lips. "I love you too, and I'd do it over again too. All the cold and fear and pain, because it brought me here. To you. To us." They fell asleep holding each other, and for the first time in months, Coulter didn't wake up afraid. April brought actual warmth. The snow melted rapidly, revealing the valley beneath. Dead grass, yes, but also the first tiny shoots of green. Life coming back. They made the trip to town together, Evelyn riding easier now, her ankle finally healed. With the money from the collection, they bought 6 chickens, seed for the garden, and a young cow that was pregnant. The rancher selling her gave them a good price and advice on calving. "You two look like hell," he said bluntly. "Feel like it too," Coulter admitted. "But you made it. That's what matters." The rancher loaded the cow into their borrowed wagon. First winter's always the hardest. Second one's easier because you know what's coming. Third one, you might even enjoy parts of it. On the ride back, Evelyn said, "Do you think he's right? That it gets easier?" "I don't know. Maybe." Coulter glanced at her. "Does it matter?" "I guess not. We'll do it either way." "Yeah, we will." They spent late April and all of May working. Really working. Not just surviving. Coulter repaired the barn roof properly, replaced the chicken coop, fix the fence line. Evelyn planted the garden, rows of seeds that would become food, become hope, become proof they'd made it. The two surviving cattle from winter recovered their weight. The pregnant cow they'd bought, who Evelyn named Bess, settled in like she'd always been there. The new chickens laid eggs, which felt like pure luxury after months of nothing. One morning in early June, Coulter woke to find Evelyn already outside. He found her standing in the garden, looking at the first shoots breaking through the soil. "It's growing," she said, wonder in her voice. "Yeah, it is. We did that. We planted something and it's growing." Coulter put his arms around her from behind, rested his chin on her shoulder. "We did." They stood there watching green things push toward the sun, and it felt like more than just a garden. It felt like proof. They'd survived the worst and come out the other side. They'd built something that would outlast winter. "Coulter?" Evelyn leaned back against him. "Do you remember what you said? About wanting this but easier?" "Yeah, I think we're getting there." She was right. It wasn't easy. Ranching never would be. But it was easier than dying. Easier than fighting just to wake up one more day. This was living, actual living, and it felt like victory. Summer arrived in full force by July. The valley transformed into the paradise Coulter had described months ago during the darkest nights of winter. Grass grew thick and green. Wildflowers covered the hillsides. The creek ran clear and cold, and Coulter taught Evelyn to fish. They worked from dawn until dusk, but it was good work, productive work. The garden flourished under Evelyn's care. She had a gift for it, somehow knowing what each plant needed. By August, they were eating fresh vegetables, and the taste after months of preserved food was almost overwhelming. Bess gave birth to a healthy calf in late July. Evelyn stayed up all night with her, helping when the delivery got complicated, and when it was done and the calf was standing on wobbly legs, she came back to the cabin with tears on her face. "We have 3 cattle again," she said. "We do. We're rebuilding. It's actually working." Coulter pulled her close, feeling her heartbeat against his chest. "You sound surprised." "I am. A little." She laughed, the sound bright and clear. "I didn't let myself believe it until now, that we could actually do this. We can do anything." He meant it. After the winter they'd survived, anything else felt possible. They fell into patterns that felt like permanence. Morning chores together, Evelyn feeding chickens while Coulter handled the larger animals. Afternoons working separate tasks, him on fence line or roof repairs, her in the garden or cabin. Evenings together, cooking dinner, reading from the Whitman book, talking about plans for next year. Some nights they'd sit on the porch and watch the sun set over the mountains. Evelyn would lean against Coulter's shoulder, and they'd listen to the valley settling into darkness. Sometimes wolves howled in the distance, but the sound didn't scare them anymore. It was just part of the landscape, part of the life they'd chosen. "Do you ever miss Philadelphia?" Coulter asked one night. Evelyn was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes I miss the idea of it. The person I thought I'd be there. But the actual city? The factory? That life?" She shook her head. "No, I don't miss dying slowly in a place that didn't care if I existed. And here? Here I'm alive." She took his hand, squeezed it. Really alive. For the first time, maybe ever. Coulter understood that. He'd been alive before she came, but it had been a gray sort of existence. Surviving, but not thriving. Going through motions without meaning. Now every day had meaning. The cattle had meaning. The garden had meaning. The repairs and plans and small victories all meant something because they were building toward a future together. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "Answering the ad. Getting on that train. Not giving up when things got hard." Evelyn turned to look at him, her face soft in the fading light. "Thank you for writing it, for taking a chance on a stranger, for being exactly who you are." They kissed as the stars came out, and Coulter thought about how strange life was, how the worst thing that had ever happened to him, being desperate and lonely enough to advertise for a wife, had led to the best thing, how Evelyn's worst circumstances had brought her to him, how sometimes the path to happiness went through hell first. By September, they had money saved from selling eggs and vegetables in town. Not much, but enough to feel secure, enough to plan. "I want to buy another cow," Evelyn said. "Build the herd faster." "I was thinking chickens, a whole flock." We could do both if we're careful. They were sitting at the table, counting coins, planning like they had a future worth planning for. Because they did. The shadow of last winter had faded, replaced by the reality of this summer and the promise of next year. "What about the strawberries?" Evelyn asked. "You promised me strawberries." "We can plant them in spring. They'll fruit by next summer. I'm holding you to that." "I know you are." She smiled, that bright, genuine smile that still caught him off guard sometimes. The woman who'd stepped off the train in December had been guarded, careful, afraid to hope. The woman sitting across from him now was none of those things. She'd been forged by winter and come out stronger. They both had. October brought the first frost, a reminder that winter would come again. But this time, they were ready. The barn was repaired and stocked with hay. The cabin was chinked tight against drafts. They had food stored, firewood cut and stacked, supplies bought and organized. And they had each other. That was the real difference. Last year, Coulter had faced winter alone, desperate, advertising for help. This year, he had a partner who knew what was coming and was ready to face it. The first snow fell in early November, light and almost pretty. Evelyn stood on the porch watching it, and Coulter came to stand beside her. "Here we go again," she said. "Yeah, but different this time." "How so?" "We know what we're doing now. We know we can survive it." He put his arm around her shoulders. "And we know it ends. That's the important part. Winter always ends." Evelyn leaned into him. "Think we'll make it through easier this time?" "I think we'll make it through together. That's all that matters." The snow fell softly, covering the valley in white. But this time, it didn't look like death. It looked like a season. Difficult, yes. Dangerous, yes. But survivable. They'd proven that already. As December approached, Coulter found himself thinking about the man he'd been a year ago. Desperate and alone, writing an ad in the back of a newspaper, hoping some stranger would answer and save him from his loneliness. He'd gotten his answer, just not in the way he'd expected. Evelyn hadn't saved him from loneliness. She'd saved him from himself, from the belief that survival was enough, that getting through each day was the same as living. She'd shown him that fighting together was better than enduring alone, that choosing someone every day was worth more than any easy comfort. They'd survived winter. But more than that, they'd built something that winter couldn't destroy, a partnership, a home, a life. On Christmas Eve, exactly 1 year after they'd married in the cabin during the blizzard, they stood together on the ridge overlooking the ranch. Snow covered everything, but smoke rose from the cabin chimney. The barn was solid. The livestock were fat and healthy. The garden plot waited under snow for spring planting. "Hard to believe it's been a year," Evelyn said. "Feels like longer." "In a good way or bad way?" Coulter thought about it. "Both. The winter felt like forever, but also like we've known each other much longer than a year. We've lived more than most people live in 10 years. She took his hand. That tends to speed things up. "Any regrets?" "None." She said it firmly, no hesitation. "You?" "Not a single one." They walked back to the cabin together, footsteps crunching in fresh snow. Inside was warmth and food and all the small comforts they'd fought so hard to keep. But more than that, it was home. Real home. The kind built not from wood and nails, but from shared survival, from promises kept in the darkest moments, from two people choosing each other repeatedly until the choosing became permanent. That night, lying in bed with Evelyn asleep beside him, Coulter listened to the wind outside. It was picking up, another storm coming. But this time he wasn't afraid. They'd survived the worst winter could offer. They'd survived wolves and starvation and cold that should have killed them. They'd survived each other's fears and doubts and the terrible intimacy of learning someone while fighting just to stay alive. And they'd come out the other side with something that couldn't be broken by weather or hardship or time. They'd come out with love. Real love. The earned kind that knew exactly what it was choosing and chose it anyway. Spring would come again, summer would return, and they'd be there to meet it, together, building on what they'd survived. That was the promise they'd made, not in words spoken by a justice of the peace or written on legal documents, but in the way they split food when there wasn't enough, in how they took turns being strong when the other faltered. In every moment they chose to keep fighting for a future that wasn't guaranteed. Those were the promises that mattered, the ones written in action, proven in survival, sealed in the quiet moments between disasters when they looked at each other and decided that yes, this was worth it, all of it. Outside, the storm grew louder. Snow began to fall. But inside the cabin, Coulter Hayes and his wife were warm and safe and together. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.